Good evening, everybody. I started out outside, but I couldn't do it. It's 46 degrees and here in White Swan in Central Washington, and but the wind is blowing, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm shivering, and I'm not going to be able to speak fluently. So forgive me for making a scene change there. I want to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Augustine. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, with my friends at Manhattan Mennonite. I'm coming to you today from the homeland of the Confederated Bands and Tribes of the Yakima Nation. That's the Yakima Indian Reservation in Central Washington. And I want to especially acknowledge those people, our elders and ancestors, who have protected this land and its sacred waters for untold generations. I'm not a Yakima woman, actually. I'm Tewa. I'm from the homeland that is now known as northern New Mexico, and specifically, I am from the people of the Round Earth, which is the Nambe Pueblo. And it's kind of a funny story how I find myself situated in Washington, which is thousands of miles away from my homeland. And also, I want to just more fully introduce myself so you have an understanding of who's presenting to you. While I happen to be racially Native American, that's the race of my father specifically, and also to some degree of my mother. I'm not tribally affiliated, so I'm not a member of any tribe, including the Pueblo that's my ancestral homeland. I want to be really clear about that, and that's why I often say that I'm a descendant, because tribal affiliation is actually a political affiliation, which is to say that you're acknowledged by a tribe as a result of a continuous relationship through your progenitors or your ancestors. And so my relationship with the tribe that I am connected to, genetically anyway, was severed as a result of child removal. So my father, who was born in 1943, was removed from the care of his mother and his family, and removed from his homeland. At birth, actually, at the time of his birth, he was placed in a Catholic boys' home, and he lived there for until he reached the age of 18. And so he wasn't ever placed in an adoptive home or anything like that. He was in a segregated boys' home for his whole childhood. And the condition that he grew up in was pretty tough. He had a very difficult beginning. And, he endured physical abuse and emotional abuse and psychological abuse and neglect. And as a result of that, had a lot of challenges in adulthood. And so I think in the dominant culture here in the United States, we like to have a story that we can tell where somebody from humble beginnings kind of conquers all. That's not really the story in my family. My father struggled with many of the things that traumatized people struggle with. He struggled with addiction. He struggled with incarceration and mental health issues, and in fact was diagnosed as a schizophrenic. And as a result of that, my growing up experience was chaotic and difficult. It was a violent growing up experience, and I grew up in poverty, which is consistent with the life experiences of many people who grew up in this kind of experiencing this kind of trauma, that is to say, with parents who were traumatized. And so the reason that I like to begin with this kind of introduction is to say, first of all, that the doctrine of discovery, as people talk about it, or this legal doctrine that is grounded in legal precedent in the United States, and is also grounded in Christian doctrine, is not some kind of ancient or antiquated idea. It is a system and a paradigm that's in place today in our country and around the world. And the systems in play have an impact on Indigenous peoples and, in fact, create reality for Indigenous peoples today. Just like me, my life history and my whole reality was very much framed by the doctrine of discovery, which made it possible for my father to be removed from his family of origin and to be separated from his people for his entire life. And so I want to begin that way, and also to say, and many of you know, that the Indian Child Welfare Act is under attack now. There are 3 states that are working together to find it to be unconstitutional. The Indian Child Welfare Act was put in place to remove this threat of child removal and to provide Indigenous tribes the authority to determine where children from their own tribes would be placed. And there's an argument being made that says that the Indian Child Welfare Act is discriminating against children based upon their race, but really it's determined based on racial or based on tribal identity, which is a political designation and not a racial one. So had my father been protected by the Indian Child Welfare Act, he would not have been removed from his family. But because he was removed, I have missed the opportunity to have a tribal affiliation with the tribe that he was born into. And that's true for all of my siblings, and there are 8 of us, and all of our children. So in all the different policy eras to remove Indigenous peoples from their lands in the United States, the most effective mechanism of removal has been child removal. And child removal is a process that's ongoing today and is still very much with us. So the doctrine of discovery, this doctrine was rooted in Christianity and is now a legal doctrine in the United States since the 1880s. It really talks about how one race is deserving of privileges to the exclusion of others, and that would be those people who are European, who are the settlers of this continent. And the doctrine of discovery says that those people who came as settlers from Europe had the right and actually the justification by God to come and take over lands simply because they were ruled by a Christian monarch. And so God had empowered these monarchs, these powerful monarchs, to come and take over the lands and territories and essentially the lives of Indigenous peoples here in North America and around the world. And when Justice Marshall, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who wrote the series of Marshall decisions in 1823 that were outlining or embedding the doctrine of discovery into legal precedent in the United States, he said that Native American people were adequately compensated for the loss of their lands because they received civilization and Christianity. So while it was acknowledged that they had lost all of their wealth and birthright and self-determination, the compensation that was considered adequate was the receipt of Christianity and what he termed as civilization. And so this is the legal framework that defines reality for Indigenous peoples today in the United States. And I also want to say it defines reality for all of us, actually. And so I'm sharing this with you this morning, or I'm sorry, it's not morning, it's evening, around this Thanksgiving holiday. And I wanted to reflect on that a little bit and talk a little bit about a theological framework that maybe some of you have heard about called triumphalism. Is that familiar to you? It's that idea that Christian people, as followers of Christ, an elect group of people, are empowered to take things especially in the process of colonization, that did not belong to them. And in the process of worship or acknowledgement to God, that that it's important to give thanks for the receipt of lands and territories and wealth, but in a triumphant way. So to those people who are the victors, they receive the benefits. And so triumphalism is this sort of understanding that that Christians in their posture are triumphant and blessed, and that blessing is in a way an indication of the rightness of that receipt. So that in receiving land and territory and wealth, that sort of demonstrates the rightness of their position. So God has blessed you with this wealth and power and security. And because you receive that wealth and power and security, you're worthy of receiving that. And so I want to suggest that the Thanksgiving holiday is really an acknowledgement of that, sort of this opportunity to give thanks for wealth, for land, for security and position, in a context of understanding a sort of righteousness that is rewarded. And so I want to just challenge that a little bit, coming from a different perspective, a perspective as one of the colonized. So I'm from the people who built the cities of clay on the crest of cliffs or mesas that were seized by the Spanish, the people who originally lived in homes with the good things in the river valley of those what is now called the Rio Grande, the people who dug the wells in the desert that have been used and depleted by others for more than 500 years, the people who the fields of corn and tobacco, the vine, squash, and beans, the first people who were satisfied by those four sacred plants. So if you're looking at that story, the Exodus story, I'm one of those people, one of the Canaanites that was displaced. And I'm wondering, given that position, about the justification or the sort of triumphal posture of the recipients. That is to say, is it truly the case that that receipt, or that the thanksgiving of that receipt of prosperity is truly one that is justified? And it's kind of a big question, and I'm not going to make a case here, but I think it's a useful thing to think about as we as a nation come together and give thanks. What is it that we're giving thanks for? Is it an encouragement to participate in a narrative that is an ongoing narrative in our experience together as a nation, and also in our experience together as a church? A narrative that says that the Christian church is chosen and justified in the receipts of wealth and power and privilege. Coming from an indigenous cosmology, I find the Thanksgiving holiday to be a little bit, it's very different from what I've learned to celebrate from my elders. Here where I live among the Yakima people, the Yakima give thanks in the spring feast before they go out to gather. So that is to say, they give thanks and acknowledgement to the Creator before there's any kind of food to harvest, because they are acknowledging their place in the family of things at that very first beginning. And they remind themselves to take just what they need and to leave plenty for others, and to walk lightly on the earth, to not take in all of the harvest, but rather to acknowledge that they are living in an environment that others, including plants and animals and others, depend on for their survival as well. Among my people, the Tewa people, we give thanks in the morning and every single morning for the sun, for the sunrise, that every single day the Creator is giving us warmth and the ability to live another day. It's warming the earth, providing food for vegetation, and enabling us to live. And that each and every day that we're able to rise, we need to give thanks at the sunrise. It's really quite a different perspective in terms of thinking about who we are and where we are in relation to the rest of the universe. And I wonder if the Thanksgiving holiday and the narrative that we've received with it as Americans is really encouraging an attitude that is more consistent with triumphalism, or this understanding that we are acknowledging something that we deserve as part of the American experience. And so I want to just close with the second scripture that we heard today from Psalms, which says to trust in the Lord and do good, and in doing so receive safe pasture, and to commit our ways to the Lord, and we'll receive the desires of our heart. I've thought about the scripture a lot. It's really important to me. It's a scripture that my mother sent to me in the mail, actually, several decades ago, and I put on my fridge. It's kind of lived there since then. I've thought a lot about that. What does it mean to receive the desires of your heart? And one of the things that I've noticed, and I wonder if this is true for you too, is in committing my ways to the Lord, or to the Creator. It says, commit your ways to the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. And I've thought that in committing my ways to the Creator, living with a posture of reverence and gratitude, that the desires in my heart have changed. So I don't crave wealth or status or even security or safety. What I crave is justice, and specifically justice for my people and for all of creation. So just wanted to share that with you this morning. Thank you. It's not morning. I really realize it's not morning. I'm just used to preaching in the morning. Thank you for forgiving me for that foible. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.